There are places the world forgets, and places that refuse to forget the world. The old house that stood at the edge of the Whispering River was one of them. Weathered by time, wrapped in trailing vines and quiet memories, it waited patiently for the day its doors would open again. And on a mist-covered evening when the air smelled like rain and unresolved destiny, two figures finally returned. Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. The silence carried 1,000 moments they had lived, and 1,000 more they had never dared to speak aloud. The house they once called home, though neither had admitted it, stood before them like a frozen heartbeat. Xiao Zhan paused at the gate, running his fingers lightly over the faded wood as if it were an old friend. His eyes softened, and in the glow of the dim lanterns, the traces of exhaustion on his face transformed into something gentler, something almost vulnerable. Wang Yibo stood beside him, hands in his pockets, the corners of his lips tugging upward in a small, rare smile. His gaze wasn't on the house, it was on Xiao Zhan. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low, barely above a whisper. Xiao Zhan exhaled, the sound mingling with the night breeze. "I've been ready for years." The gate creaked open and the world shifted. Inside, the house breathed. Dust danced lazily in the air as if greeting them. The wooden floorboards groaned beneath their steps, but instead of sounding old, they sounded alive, like a heartbeat waking up after a long dream. The living room was exactly as they had left it. A forgotten guitar leaning against the sofa, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, and a collection of photos scattered around as though a storm of memories had passed through. Yibo picked up a photo, the one where Xiao Zhan was laughing uncontrollably while Yibo held a cake that was tilted at a very unfortunate angle. "You still can't bake," Xiao Zhan teased, leaning closer. "And you still laugh too much," Yibo answered, tapping the edge of the photo against Xiao Zhan's forehead. They both smiled, and for a moment everything felt like it once was. Not perfect but deeply real. The true magic began when they wandered into the room at the end of the hallway. It was the room they built together years ago when they needed a place where the world couldn't reach them. They had painted the walls deep blue with scattered white speckles to mimic the night sky. A ceiling projector they once used still hung crookedly, and on the floor, covered in a thin layer of dust, was the old journal they wrote in together, one page by Xiao Zhan, the next by Yibo. Xiao Zhan kneaded the book open, feeling the weight of every memory pressed into its pages. Yibo crouched beside him, their shoulders brushing gently, sending an electric ripple through the silence. "Look at this," Xiao Zhan whispered. It was an entry written in Xiao Zhan's looping handwriting. "If we ever get lost, let this place guide us back." Yibo swallowed hard. "Looks like it worked," he murmured. Outside the window, rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, drumming rhythmically against the roof. The sound filled the room, wrapping them in a cocoon of nostalgia. Yibo rested his head lightly against the wall behind him. His voice carried a sadness that only someone who had loved deeply could understand. "Do you ever think about what we were supposed to become?" Xiao Zhan closed the journal carefully. "All the time." Yibo looked up, his eyes burning, fierce and gentle at once. "Then why did we leave this place?" Xiao Zhan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the small projector switch and turned it on. The ceiling lit up, scattering artificial stars across the blue-painted surface. Some lights flickered weakly, others glowed strong and bright. It was imperfect but utterly beautiful. "Because," Xiao Zhan said eventually, watching the stars shimmer above them, "sometimes people have to leave home to learn how to find it again." Yibo stepped closer, the reflection of the starry ceiling shining in his eyes. He reached out, brushing a stray hair away from Xiao Zhan's forehead, a gesture so intimate it made the room feel smaller, warmer. "And did you find home?" Yibo asked softly. Xiao Zhan met his gaze without wavering. "I just did." The world seemed to exhale with them. But the story didn't end with quiet confessions. No, the house had more to reveal. A sudden gust of wind blew open the door of the attic above, slamming it into the wall. Both of them jolted, and then exchanged the same look they'd shared countless times before, a look that said, "Let's explore." They climbed the narrow stairs together. The attic was dark except for a single shaft of moonlight cutting through a cracked window, and in that beam of silver light lay a familiar box, one they had buried under blankets and forgotten dreams. Xiao Zhan reached it first, brushing off the dust. "I thought we lost this." Yibo folded his arms, leaning against a wooden beam. "We didn't lose it. We ran from it." Inside the box were the letters they wrote to each other yet never sent. Words that were too raw, too honest at the time. Words written when their hearts felt too loud. Xiao Zhan opened one, his voice trembling as he read aloud. "I miss the way you say things without saying anything at all. The way silence feels different when you're around." Yibo heard those words like they were written yesterday. He stepped closer, taking the letter gently from Xiao Zhan's hands and folding it carefully. "You always wrote like your heart was on fire. And you always pretended you didn't notice." "I did notice," Yibo whispered. "I just didn't know how to handle it." The rain outside intensified, roaring against the roof like the sky itself was remembering something. Lightning flashed, illuminating the attic for a heartbeat. In that split second, Xiao Zhan saw the longing in Yibo's eyes, unguarded and unspoken. He reached out, fingers grazing Yibo's wrist. "Do you know how long I've waited for you to say that?" Yibo didn't pull away, not this time. His voice was low and certain. "You won't have to wait anymore." They stood there in the dim attic, surrounded by their own words, by the love they once feared and the truth they could no longer hide. The house itself seemed to glow with relief, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Hours passed like minutes as they talked, about the past, the pain, the distance, and the silent moments where they thought they'd lost each other forever. But they didn't. Somehow, against everything, they found their way back. When the storm outside finally calmed, a soft dawn light spread over the horizon, seeping into the house through cracks and corners. The air held a peaceful warmth, the kind that comes only after a long night of truth. Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo walked outside, standing on the porch. Birds sang softly, and the river reflected the first colors of morning. The world looked new. Yibo stretched his hand toward Xiao Zhan, not hesitantly, not halfway, but fully. "Let's rebuild this place," he said. "Not because we have to. Because we want to." Xiao Zhan took his hand with a smile that reached straight into his soul. "Then let's start today." The night had deepened by the time Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo finally pushed open the door to the house they once called home, but the darkness only made the glow inside more mysterious, more alive. The dim light from the lantern outside spilled across the floor, revealing swirls of dust that rose like ancient spirits welcoming their long-awaited return. Xiao Zhan took a slow step inside. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, almost as loud as the soft creaking of the wooden boards beneath him. He looked around with wide, trembling eyes, not with fear, but with a strange, overwhelming longing. Yibo stayed close behind him. His footsteps were steady, but his breath came out uneven, almost shaky. It wasn't the house that made him nervous. It was the fact that Xiao Zhan was here again, beside him in the same space where everything had once begun. The living room was a silent museum of their old life. The abandoned guitar still leaned against the sofa. The old puzzle was still unfinished on the table. Even the small blanket Xiao Zhan used on cold nights was draped carelessly over the arm of the chair, untouched. Xiao Zhan bent down and picked up the puzzle piece resting near his foot. He stared at it with a soft, painful smile. "You never finished it," he murmured, brushing dust from the piece as if it were something sacred. Yibo leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I was waiting," he said simply. Xiao Zhan turned. "For what?" "For you." The words landed between them with the weight of thunder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house grew impossibly still, like it was holding its breath, just like both of them. Xiao Zhan placed the puzzle piece back on the table, deliberately, gently. "You shouldn't have," he whispered. "And you shouldn't have left," Yibo replied quietly. Xiao Zhan froze. The sentence pierced through him with accuracy that only someone who truly knew him could deliver. But it wasn't cruel. It wasn't meant to blame. It was a truth spoken by someone who had waited too long in silence. Xiao Zhan slowly walked toward the window, running his fingers over the faded curtains. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," he said, voice low. "I left because I was afraid of what staying meant." Ba stepped closer. The air between them continued to tighten, warm, electric. "What did staying mean to you?" Ba asked. Xiao Zhan swallowed hard. He didn't answer. Not yet. Not when the truth felt so dangerously close. The lantern flickered outside, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The house felt like it had swallowed time whole, like it remembered everything they ever whispered, every argument, every laugh, every moment they tried to forget. Ba walked past him into the hallway. Xiao Zhan watched silently as he opened the door to the room at the end, their sanctuary. The room glowed faintly from the painted stars on the wall. Some were faded, some still bright, like memories refusing to disappear. They stood in the middle of the room together, the ghost of their younger selves lingering in the air. Yibo touched the wall gently. "We spent whole nights here," he said, voice soft. "You taught me how to sleep under fake stars when I couldn't sleep under real ones," Xiao Zhan added. Yibo gave a small smile. "You were scared of thunderstorms. You were scared of emotions." Their eyes met. And for the first time since returning, they both laughed, a real warm laugh that eased the tension. Xiao Zhan walked to the old projector and clicked it on. The ceiling exploded into a galaxy of scattered, shimmering lights. The fake stars flickered like fireflies caught in the moment. Yibo whispered, "It still works. Just like we still work," Xiao Zhan replied before he even realized the words had escaped. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was soft, alive, hopeful. Ba stepped closer. "Say that again." Xiao Zhan shook his head lightly, looking away. "Xiao Zhan." He looked back at him, slowly, cautiously. Yibo's eyes held a storm, gentle at the surface, fierce underneath. "You think we still work?" Ba asked. "I think," Xiao Zhan began, breath-catching, "we were never broken." The projector hummed above them, casting moving constellations across their faces. The light danced across Yibo's cheek, catching on the small scar near his eyebrow, the one Xiao Zhan once teased him about, the one he once kissed without thinking. Xiao Zhan raised a hand slowly. His fingers hovered near Yibo's face but didn't touch. "Not yet." "I shouldn't have run," Xiao Zhan said. "But I was scared of losing this place. Scared of losing you." Yibo's expression softened. "You didn't lose me. You just forgot the way home." "And now," Xiao Zhan whispered. Ba stepped closer. Their foreheads nearly touched. Their breaths mingled in the tiny space between them. "Now," Yibo murmured, "you're here." The room seemed to glow brighter. The sound of rain began again, soft, calming, like nature was echoing their heartbeat. The river outside flowed steadily. The house embraced the night, and with every passing second, the distance between them shrank. Xiao Zhan closed his eyes. "I thought you wouldn't want to see me again." "You thought wrong," Yibo replied. "I always wanted you to come back." Xiao Zhan opened his eyes slowly. A tear clung to his lashes but didn't fall. "Yibo," he whispered. Yibo reached out and wiped the tear gently with his thumb. "You don't have to say anything else. Just stay this time." The stars above them flickered softly. The night wrapped around their shoulders like a warm blanket. In that moment, with the room filled with memories and the future trembling at their fingertips, Xiao Zhan finally whispered the truth he had carried for years. "This place wasn't home without you." Yibo inhaled sharply, the kind of breath someone takes when their heart finally unclenches. Without another word, he pulled Xiao Zhan into a slow, grounding embrace. The kind of embrace that said everything their voices had been too afraid to admit. In the quiet room painted with stars, their story began again. Two hearts, one home. A return that was more than destiny, it was healing. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo stories.